And go ahead and call a meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. Number one on the agenda, approval of the November 2021 minutes. I sent those out, hoping everybody had a chance to look at them and make any corrections if need be, or at least any comments. Okay, well, that being said, if everybody's had a chance to look at them, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes for November of 2021.
I make a motion that the minutes be accepted.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Dave and seconded by Wayne. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, welcome,
Aye.
Jeremy. How you doing?
Doing well, thanks.
Okay, good. All right, then we got that one. Public comment. Any public comment tonight? It doesn't look like we have any public online, so I'm going to go with probably not, but we'll just give it a couple of seconds to be sure. Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and move into the business portion of this. Hey, Ted, how's it going? I want to go ahead and you guys feel free to unmute if you want. So if you want to just chime in, you can go ahead and do so at any time. We spent a lot of time last month talking about the stormwater drainage and the need to put it together a plan. Mylan, who is not with us tonight, I was hoping he would join us, put together quite a list of things to talk about, and we didn't get a chance to talk about a lot of it. So we were, we did talk about the, what I like to call the 30,000 foot discussion, where we looked at it from a citywide perspective. But the one thing we didn't really get down into is a lot of this started last fall, when we had a lot of the runoff into the streets, gravel, mud, and whatnot onto the roads. And we wanted to talk a little bit about what we can do to mitigate some of that. We have, we've got spring coming, and we could have, again, we could have a lot of mud and gravel and stuff coming into the streets, especially along Woodland Hills Drive, on, let's see, Broad Hollow, Spring are probably perfect examples. I know that Oak Drive and Valley View get pretty gravelly as well. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to talk about maybe doing some mitigation on that a little bit, something, in the near term, because the study is going to be more of a long-term, near to long-term discussion that's going to take, or project is going to take quite some time. In the meantime, we got residents who are a little bit concerned about what's happening now in our streets. We've got low spots in the roads that aren't draining, and how can we deal with some of that? And welcome, Dave. David, how you doing tonight?
Good. Just making sure I'm not muted.
Dave's got a touch screen. So anyway, I just kind of want to maybe drill down a little bit on that and just kind of open that up for discussion for anybody that may want to talk about that, or any thoughts on that. One thing that I can start the conversation off with is, I think that whatever we do short-term or near-term wise to solve some of our drainage problems will also benefit us in our long-term solutions that hopefully may be discussed in a drainage report or a drainage study.
Hey, Mark, can
Yes,
I
sir.
ask a question? And this is probably for Corbett. So Jack Snow, when he found out that the city was going to do a drainage study, he said that the city did one a few years back. Do you know anything about that other drainage study and how comprehensive it was versus what we're planning on? Or anyway.
I don't think it was very comprehensive at all. LEI I think it was in conjunction with one of the BYU Capstone projects that had been done, went through and basically just put together a map that showed culvert locations and sizes, drainage basins, but I don't think it was very I don't think there was much effort put into it other than identifying what was there.
Okay. So it didn't really look at like potential storm flows, anything
No.
like that.
No, nothing like that. I don't, at least not that I remember.
Okay.
Corbett,
So-
could I stop by tomorrow morning and pick that up from you? Do we have a copy of that?
Yeah, you'd be better off talking to Jody. If anybody knows where it's at, she would.
Now, I do have a copy, and I believe I sent it out to everybody, and I can resend it again of the Capstone study that was done. What, 2-3 years ago? Ted, you were involved with that. It was about 3 years ago, wasn't it now?
Yeah, it was about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It was just, I think they did that just after the fire, didn't they, Corbett? Didn't they do that for us just after it? So.
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember.
In that time frame, but I
Yeah.
have that I can certainly send that out to everybody again. Ben, I'll make sure you get that for sure. But that did focus more on inside the community boundaries and not so much on discharges from the city.
Yeah, and it was pretty, it was decent for students. It was decent. It was broad strokes. I mean, not to get too engineering, but they broke the city up into basins and figured out how much flow is in each drainage basin, and then what size of culverts would handle those flows for each basin, and then just generalized it for the whole basin, which is broad strokes. A little more detail would refine that.
And then along that, Ted, excuse me, you sent me the name of that study that you're working on right now, that project you're working now, that we're working on with several communities about the water coming off the mountain. I guess the question would be on that is all those flows would pretty much end up leaving the city. Is that not correct?
Yeah, so yeah, this is part of the NRCS work we're doing.
Yes, the NRCS study. I'm sorry.
That mitigation work. So we've modeled and got a 30% design, environmental and all that for we'll call it a debris basin. Can't call it avalanche with NRCS, but in effect, it would also serve for that purpose. Up there by the water tanks. And really with the basin that was built a few years ago, and if this one moves forward, it's really mitigating the drainages above the city between what would be a pre and post fire condition. However, it doesn't really address, the drainage that runs off the city itself. And that's what I think more the drainage study that needs to be done, needs to look at, is what are the results of the development of the city and how's that impacting the downstream communities.
Yeah. Okay. But it would benefit drainage within the city. Like it might alleviate some of the challenges we have with Broad Hollow and Woodland Hills Drive that way. So some of those drainages might be what's the word I'm looking for? Mitigated, I guess, in that, within to help within the city, which is kind of, I think, a focus point that Corbett and I talked about over the last couple of weeks is, how do we work with what we can do to control some of the drainage within the city as well as outside the city now.
Yeah. And that's what the study needs to be. This in effect, it kind of does route some of the water that comes off the hills above us. It captures that and routes that around to alleviate potential flooding issues with houses. So kind of routes it safely around the houses. For example, the one that's being planned up here channels the water down Broad Hollow with a new channel across Woodland Hills Drive, down Oak, and then off Autumn Leaf, and then drops it back into the drainage. So it's capturing the water and then routing safely the released water around the houses, and then drops it back into the drainage below the city.
So that would benefit not only drainage, well, that wouldn't not benefit drainage leaving the city, but it would benefit drainage within the city. It would still ultimately end up in a detention pond somewhere, and ultimately wherever our stormwater would end up going, that would probably be part of that flow.
Yeah, and in short, the work that's being done with this NRCS protects the city But the work that needs to be done by the city would protect others,
Correct.
communities
Okay.
downstream of
So,
us.
so that was kind of what I wanted to, focus on a little bit, is what we can do about some of the drainage, within the city to kind of help our citizenry for the time being as well, which would also hopefully benefit, the overall drainage. One example of, Corbett, I talked about maybe drain boxes, like say on Spring and Woodland Hills Drive. So if we had a catch basin or, concrete drainage box, that could catch a lot of the gravel, rock, mud, or whatever. And also that would help percolate into the ground above there, so that's flows that would never actually leave the city. Kind of stuff like that. How will that benefit both this, now and in the future? That's kind of some of the thoughts that we wanted to talk about, so we can kind of, because a lot of the citizens, we are all concerned about that, but a lot of citizens are also concerned about, the drainage in front of their yard, not only along Broad Hollow, but on other parts of the community. So wide open for suggestions on that. And I know Mylan had some ideas. I wish he was here tonight. He's probably out of town again and gets pretty busy.
I think money's going to drive some of this budget wise, but I think if there are some quick fixes that have some substance to them, I'm for looking at that and seeing, at least on an interim basis, this study that's being proposed is anticipated to be pretty involved and will really give a direction that the city needs to take in the future for some long-term abatement to problems that we have. And I anticipate, as Ted has mentioned, that it's going to cost several tens of thousands of dollars to do. But if there's some interim things that we can do to kind of patch some of the problem, I'm certainly for looking into that and seeing if some of that would be worthwhile to try to do now and factor into this coming year's budget, and as well as probably needing to set money aside for the future for a larger storm drainage study.
Okay, yeah, and what I'm hoping is any small steps we can take today. Well, my hope would be that they would tie into any larger steps that we may need to take, like you said, moving forward in the long term. So that would kind of what I'm hoping to do, is to be able to solve some of our immediate challenges and combine them with our long-term challenges.
Yeah, I don't see them being serial. I think we have to do it parallel, meaning we definitely do the things you're talking about, Wayne. Look at anything that we can do today to solve the problems. But at the same time, I think we need to, and maybe it is just saving money this year, depending upon the budget. But regardless, I'd like to at least find out what that budget number needs to be for the bigger study, so that we can see where it can fit in.
I think, Ted, are you not working up some budget figures from Jones and DeMille to give us an idea of what the long-term stormwater evaluation assessment would be? And in conjunction with that, I talked to you a couple of weeks ago about giving us a figure to do that what it's going to take to get the study done. And that could easily be factored into this year's budget, and at least maybe do some things incrementally as far as putting some of that together now and later.
Yeah, and so, yeah, and you're right, Wayne. So a couple of things I've asked our group to do, and I'll kind of term this a stormwater management plan. It's really what the title of it should be for the city. And so what I've asked our stormwater management group to do is twofold. One, and this is, I guess, going to depend on the direction of the city. One is, I think, Wayne, the conversation we had was if we were to provide some input to an RFP and help prepare something there, so consultants can prepare their scope of work to submit proposals on and maybe oversee that process. So put together a cost to kind of help the city with the process. So that's kind of one cost. And then I also asked our group just to put together a number if they were to do a stormwater management plan for Woodland Hills. And it's the same guy that's doing the modeling here. We're also modeling Maple Canyon right now for that big development that's planned down in the Davis property. So I've asked that guy to put together just a cost if he were to do, that group were to do a stormwater management plan, just to see what we think a budget number would be, so we can give that to the city. So they're working on that. Like most industries, we're long on work and short on help. And so I'm trying to push them as much as I can, but we'll get those put together.
So, rest of you folks, any thoughts from anybody else?
So for the immediate discussion, in terms of what we could do today, tomorrow, towards mitigating the problem, I'd love to hear some ideas thrown out. I mean, is something as simple as a low budget or low tech, 6-inch, 8-inch riprap on the side of the road, is that going to help us along Woodland Hills Drive or some of these other areas where speed tends to be and erosion tends to be one of the problems? I mean, is that too low tech? Is that not enough for what we're anticipating, given the fact that we had a really heavy November, December for snowfall, but last little bit's been pretty sparse to where we're back down to about normal. I don't know that we're going to necessarily need any extraordinary measures, but I'd love to talk about what we can do right now.
And that makes perfect sense, and I'd like to see, as we were talking earlier, any low tech, I think that's probably a good term for it, but any low tech or low cost solutions that we were to put in play before this study would be complete and implemented, I would just like to make sure that anything we do would benefit any long-term study that we did. And like David just said, if you slow it down, gives that groundwater better chance to percolate. That's water that ultimately would not end up leaving the city. That could be part of the study as the study moves forward. Just for the record, and I'm sure you guys on the council know this better than I do, the motion has been, the recommendation that we made in approved in November, has been sent to Jody, but it has still not been presented to the council. I think the council knows it's coming, but as of yet, it's still not been presented or approved. So we still need to get approval for that. I'm fairly confident that the council will do that. We got 2 council members here who would have a better feeling on that than I do, though. So that just to be clear, that still needs to be approved, just to develop a plan to move forward on that. So,
yeah, I know we discussed it a little bit there. Back to our low tech thing there. Sorry to divert this, Mark, a little bit, but do we know what percentage by chance of our current culverts that are in the city are actually cleared out and accessible and usable, or how many are clogged?
Corbett's probably going to be much better positioned to answer that than anybody else. I saw he raised his hand.
All of them. There
All
might
of them
be
are
a
clogged,
few.
or
There might
all of
be a
them are
few.
usable?
I'll bet 95% of them are plugged.
Okay, is there something that we could do low tech wise for those? Would that actually help us, or would they just get reclogged? Do we have some fire hydrants we need to test their flow capacity and blast them all out or something?
Well, I hesitate to say, only because that's not the way to clean them. The way to clean them is to put the vac truck, to take a jetter and clean them out, so that you don't just push the problem down the road someplace else. But then again, if you don't go above and address the issue from the top down, you're hard pressed to get anything that's very productive, that's going to last.
And that's why I was thinking of riprap.
Well, that being said, I hate to say much, only because I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. I think the biggest issue with storm drainage is we all have to realize that we're dealing with post-construction flows or post-development flows. Everything that comes off the mountain is historic flows, and that's going to pass right through the city no matter what. We have to deal with it so we don't have a negative impact. But for instance, when we did the asphalt up on Broad Hollow, when it was all said and done, Geneva had massaged the ditch on the side of the road enough that we just filled it up with riprap. Now, again, that doesn't do a ton to deal with storm drainage, aside from it deals with the velocities, picking up the rocks and the gravel, you know, and the dirt and stuff and washing it out on the road. But it doesn't deal with storm drainage. It deals with the symptom instead of the ailment, I guess. I don't know what else to say.
Kind of a Band-Aid on that sort of, and if I remember right, Corbett, I think you were saying that rock and everything that we put down was purchased and put there kind of as a storage anticipation of the project that to be used on the NRCS project. Is that a correct?
Yeah, I mean, hoping that it doesn't create more of a problem than a benefit, you know, when it's all said and done. But yeah, the idea was that it wouldn't be wasted because we could use that same rock in the final product on the ditch on the side of Broad Hollow. Correct.
Okay.
I mean, again, do you just go around town and start throwing in sumps and just make sure you don't do too many, you know, or do you get the study done so you know what you're dealing with? Yeah, there's hot spots, and could we put a sump on the side of the road at the intersection, for instance, at the intersection of Broad Hollow and Spring, without too much risk of overdoing something or you know, not doing enough? Anything is better than nothing, but again, you're talking manpower, and I'm hard pressed to get it all done now.
Right. A couple of concerns is, for example, last fall when we had a pretty good storm runoff, and we put a lot of gravel on that out in the street. I saw it. If I hadn't stopped, I may have been a statistic. But a gentleman come around the corner to make that turn from Woodland Hills up to Broad Hollow, and he hit all that loose gravel and everything, and he literally slid off of the road and into the ditch about, I don't know, 5-10 feet in front of me. And if I had not seen it coming and stopped in anticipation of that very same thing happening, it could have hit me. It could have hit somebody else. Maybe somebody who doesn't think, in those terms may not have realized that that's a hazard, and somebody could have been hurt. So not only does it maybe, benefit us from a safety perspective, but it also, how much of that rock is going to start to showing, our new roads that we just overlaid and everything else. So I'm thinking anything we can do that is within reason for you and our budget would be a benefit, not knowing exactly what the benefit's going to be, but we do know that would ultimately be a benefit that could be figured into any study. That's kind of what Mylan was talking to me about a little bit over the last couple of weeks. So,
what do you say, Ted? Can we swing? Can we wing it?
Well, sure. Will it work? I
I'm
don't
an engineering
know.
firm. I make money doing this. I can't wing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the question, always the concern with winging it is, are you spending the money wisely? I mean, you can wing it and it doesn't work, and then you have to rebuild it, right? So that's always one of the concerns. For example, putting a sump in, is the sump sized correctly? And without doing some modeling work, I don't know that we'd really know, but you could take a stab at it and it could work, maybe sized correctly. It's always hard to say. So, I think there are things that could be done possibly without, without being involved in a study. But there are things that I think need to have a little bit of, and I always feel like I sound like I'm tooting my horn, but I'm really not. But it really needs to have some engineering behind it before we do it. You know what I mean? So we're not redoing the work. But there are things you can do, like the riprap that was done down Broad Hollow. I mean, I think that's a good solution to help some of that gravel from transporting across Woodland Hills Drive. Things like that, I think, are things that can be done to help with some of the issues we have while this study's being done. Other things, I think we would probably be better to wait till the study's done, like when you're sizing basins and sumps and stuff like that. Now you can individually size a sump, look at one specific part and size it. So I think, I mean, I agree with Wayne, there's things we could be working on, but I think there's things that probably should wait.
And
And the other thing that I would, and I think Wayne's already mentioned this before, but the other piece of this puzzle, I think, is new development. And that is, as new subdivisions are approved, we ought to be thinking about, especially down in the flat where the water leaves the city, should we have the developer put in a retention basin or something? Just planning is what I'm talking about.
So.
Well, but we need to keep in mind that planning needs to happen a developer is required to deal with his own post-development flows, period. No questions asked. He's got to deal with it. But in order to get him to deal with someone else's flows, which is what we're doing now, because we're always behind the eight ball, you can't require him to deal with your flows. And so that's why I mentioned last time or a couple of times ago, council meeting, that we need to consider some kind of an incentive for the developers to do our work for us. And if we can come up with a way to make that palatable for them, then they'll do it. In the interim, they're going to deal with their own stuff anyways.
so, I mean, Corbin, what I think you're saying there is, as an example, hey, we need you to put in a detention basin that is big enough to handle the flows that your new development would create. But at the same time, if we put existing city flows into that basin, there's going to be excess flow coming out of that. We just need to realize that those aren't his flows. There are the leftover city flows that are doing that.
Right.
What I think you're saying is there something we can do to incentivize the developer to maybe put in extra detention capability in the form of density bonuses? And we're just thinking out loud here,
Absolutely.
brainstorm ideas, just something along them lines. And back to what Ted was saying earlier, and David, I don't think we're going to solve all that, thing tonight. I think if we just come up with some concepts to say, will this work and should we look into it? I hope that's the goal tonight. I don't think we're going to come up with any solutions by any means, but if we can at least take what we discussed tonight and maybe look at it a little bit closer and say, hey, maybe we can do this, but that's probably going to need a little bit more study, as Ted mentioned. But if there's some simple things we can do that'll work, super, that we could just look at and say, oh, that's an easy solution. That's a no-brainer. Well, we can do that. It's the bigger things. At what point does it become an easy fix versus maybe not so easy? That's kind of, where's that line at?
Well, and I think there's a way to get started. It might take a little bit of arm twisting on my part to Ted, but if you look at it and you can determine that it's going to take a 14 by 14 sump to serve 200 feet of road, and then just make sure that we don't do too much so that we're overdoing or wasting money. I think you could go around and start dropping a few sumps in at the worst locations, knowing that you're not going to overdo it, and also knowing that you're not going to do one sump that's going to be big enough to handle the flow at that location. It might take a series of sumps. And so to throw one in now, I don't think is going to be a detriment to the long-term project. It's just that when you figure out the long-term project, realize that you've already got a sump in certain locations.
Maybe what I could suggest, Mark, and I'll just throw it out. I know I'll let the committee, because I'm just kind of interjecting as an outside.
Well, we love you. We love you
resource.
doing that for us, because that's what you're good at.
But
Okay.
thinking by this, just in my engineering mind, normally the process that we follow is, the first thing is identify the spots where you think we have some of the bigger problems, right? And then once the spots are identified, those locations, and maybe that's something the committee could do, is talk about, here are the locations that we should probably look at solving as quickly as we can. Then we can look at those locations and say, okay, is there something we can do immediately? And then if so, what is that? And then, or is this something we have to wait a little longer term for to get some more study behind it to figure out if it's the right solution? So I think if you identify the spots, then, and then, then visit what solutions could apply to that spot. I think that would be a good approach to starting something proactively. Well, I shouldn't say reactively to the city being built.
Yeah, we do need to get that proactive part, but yes, I'm with you.
Yeah, but at least starting this process, a way to get started, right? Talk about spots, locations where you think there are issues, and then we can look at what are solutions to solve this, because there could be multiple solutions. And then what is the best solution? Is it one we can do right now?
I agree.
Also, for your information, Jones DeMille has assigned an engineer to look at all of the subdivision development plans that the city, that comes to the city. And I've talked to him and told him that the city is going to be giving greater attention to stormwater runoff, and to make sure that in his review and analysis from an engineer's standpoint, that he's covering that as best he can to make sure that a subdivision or phase of the subdivision is addressing that problem. We do have a chapter in our code having to do specifically with stormwater. So he's aware of that. And so we're going, as a planning commission, and again, in conjunction with Jones DeMille, who have the engineering knowledge and background, are going to be paying some greater attention to the subdivision phases, so that we can make sure that as we move forward, that aspect of our stormwater drainage is going to be properly addressed by the developer when they do their plans for the subdivision. So just by way of information, share that with everybody.
I apologize for the diversion just a little bit. Actually, I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that, Wayne. That is something that's very needful, is to have those conversations with them. My question is, do we have a repository? I set up a Google account a while back for us to keep some documents that we need to. Is anyone recording what conversations are taking place, what decisions are being made, so that we can have a history? So if something happens, maybe Wayne goes around a turn and someone else comes around and slips on the rocks, right? Do we have a record of what was discussed so that someone can pick up and move immediately forward on that? I think record keeping is one of the things that has bitten us in the times past on these projects.
I think in part, a good way of doing that, it's not the only way, but to keep maybe more detailed minutes of particulars of the discussion that we have here. This is recorded as well. So I don't know if recordings can be downloaded, Dave, into that document file, or how that works. But I think at least this could be a start of collecting this information that we talk about and sharing thoughts and ideas about it all into minutes that are available anytime.
Yeah, just thank you for bringing that issue up, David, because you're exactly right that we do need to keep records of the conversations that we're having. Just to be clear, we cannot do that on Google. And that's because the city's official system is basically Microsoft 365. And so we have access to Microsoft 365, at least as council members, city employees, and so forth. And any documents need to be stored on that so that they can be grammed. So
Okay,
please don't set up a Google account, but do.
I already set it up a
keep
long time ago,
records.
David. I set that up a long time ago as a way, and the fact that it's set up does not preclude those documents being transferred into the account. In other words, if we have a private individual having a conversation, as part of our road committee here, they can take the notes in whatever format they want. They could handwrite the notes and then transfer it into the city information. I'm assuming that's not going to be a legal issue, but this was set up a year ago.
More than that, probably.
I think it was set up
So-
several years ago when we started looking at the road project. We started, you started that Google account to just put comments in it. And honestly, I don't think we have used it the way it was intended to be used. I have written reports and follow-ups on our meetings and have sent them out to everybody. So those would be on record. You know, it would be just my Word document typed up and sent to a copy to you folks as well as to Jody. So she should have a lot of what we have said that I have recorded in somewhere. I'm sure wherever she stores it, rather be in an email account someplace, but we should have a lot of that on record. And I still have a copy of what I've sent over the last couple of years in my files too. So if need be, I can round all those up and resend them.
David, let me ask real quickly here. For those of us who are on the committee, and if we have conversations with the people, or we do some, let's say we go out and we do a survey on our own we want to make notes of something that we've observed. Can you set up access to that city account with the O365 for us?
I interject quick there because
Yeah, go
anything
Jody.
anything you put in there is able to be obtained under grandma. So we
Okay.
want to be careful in what capacity you're doing something in. If you're doing it as a resident, just wanting some information, then keep those notes to yourself. If you're doing it as a member of the committee, realize that anything you put in there can be requested through grandma.
Correct.
Well,
And
and
that's
not
the
only do
direction
we
I wanted to
want
go.
Not only can it be, but actually we want it to be, if it was done as a member of the committee. But yeah, if you're doing it, personal survey, whatever, that you're just trying to kind of gather your neighbors' opinions or whatever, yeah, keep that to yourself. And then you can bring the summary of that to our meeting, and then it should end up in the minutes, but you don't have to like bring the whole thing.
Right. And that's, thank you for that, both Jody and David. Thank you for that input. That's actually the direction I was hoping we would go. And I apologize for the diversion from the topic at hand. But I do think that at some point we need to make sure that our efforts are recorded, in a grandma friendly way, and in a way that's going to protect the city as well. And I perfectly understand what you're saying with that. But I didn't want to have the same types of situations where we've been bitten by storm drains put in, and then it floods someone's house or that floods someone's driveway, and we're responsible because we can't actually tell what went on.
Mhm.
I'll back out now. I actually like the idea of what Ted was talking about in terms of, okay, let's identify the areas. That's if nothing else, before we're done tonight, let's at least identify the areas that have an immediate need to be addressed. We can address how to fix them, but at least identify the areas to start with. And then my recommendation is to, maybe next time look at possible solutions that may include, and I hate to use this word, but an undersized sump, because you can always make it bigger if you need to, but you want to at least address the immediate need first and do it in a way that's going to have some impact to help you out. And then maybe could be a combination of sump and or riprap in the particularly harsh areas. Anyway, I'll back out now for just a minute.
Well, let me follow up with Dave's comment. If we can identify a few areas around the city now, and it gives us an opportunity as committee members to go around before the next meeting and take a look at it and get some ideas and thoughts and bring those back to the next meeting as possible things that we might do to address them. And we may be able to share, around where we live or areas that we think are a good place to do some remedial action sooner rather than later. So I think, the more that we can share that kind of thing too, then, that's what the committee is, to everybody provide their thoughts and input and suggestions into it all to try to address the problem.
Actually, agreed, Wayne, and that's actually where the record keeping comes into play. If we had a place where we could keep it, and as Dave was saying, maybe we'd want to put a summary in the official, grandma searchable area, right? But it would be nice to have kind of an intermediate sandbox, if you will, for us to like, okay, here's what Wayne's doing. Here's what Corbett's doing. Here's what he's done. Here's some conversations that maybe Ted had or Ben had. That would be nice to be able to see and keep consistent the efforts from location to location. Sorry, Mark, I wasn't meaning to.
Yeah, no, I'm writing a note. I'm just, my pen, my shorthand is not as short as most people's. Okay. So the thing that obviously is, as we look at doing this, and you know, in our next item on the agenda, this may tap into some of that too, is, you know, the things that we look at doing, there are going to be some budget consequences to all that. So I think that as we start looking at moving forward with stuff like that, you know, two things we need to take into consideration. One is, you know, we do have spring runoff coming here pretty quick, and sometimes that's where our challenges, you know, happen is we get some heavy runoffs. And two, you know, what are going to be the budget complications with doing all this? So anything that we want to get done, we probably need to get to the budget committee as well as the council so that they can take steps necessary to see how anything that we suggest is paid for, I guess, for lack of a better choice of words. So those would be two things that we would probably, or I think we need at least two things that we also need to take into consideration as we move forward on this. Any other thoughts on this?
Well, a lot of that's going to be driven by how many areas are there that may be critical that we could address right now in one way or another. And to bring that back then to a follow-up meeting, and Corbett's going to have a good idea as to some of the costs for size of, if we think a collection box or sump box is maybe the answer to it, and start putting some of this together. You know, I don't think it's going to be too productive without budget figures to go along with it for the city council.
I totally agree. You know, and I know Dave, but you know, we've had some discussion this in the past, but yeah, I think that in order to make a presentation on what we think needs to be done, there needs to be some budget numbers that go along with it. That's my personal thought.
And keep in mind with those numbers, we're not asking for exact.
Correct.
We're
Yeah,
asking
they
for
are
ballpark.
budget numbers, budget estimates. Agreed. We're not, yeah, agreed with you 100% on that.
And then inflate them by about 30 or 40%. I just got some numbers on installing 8-inch PVC in an unpaved road, $210 a foot.
It used to be a highway. You could build a highway for that not too long
Yeah.
ago. Okay.
We did, for comparison, the one we did here in town was about $40 a foot. The one we got last week was 210.
Okay. Thanks for that encouraging bit of news there, Ted. We appreciate it.
That's what I'm saying, inflate the numbers.
Well, the other thing too, that, you know, what Ted was just saying is this trend isn't stopping. The sooner you convert cash into actual physical goods that you can put down in the ground is better.
Which is exactly why we did that road bond here a couple of years ago to get ahead of this, and it looks like it may have very well paid off for us. You know, when your inflation rate increase is what, 15 times the cost of your interest rate, yeah, we're coming out way ahead.
Yeah, the inflation rate in construction right now is somewhere between 10 and 15%.
So the way I interpret that is it would behoove us to make decisions sooner rather than later because cash loses its value. Inflation is going to reduce our purchasing power for whatever bond we have.
All right, yeah, Ted, yeah, agreed. We probably need to get, numbers that, I don't even want to try and keep up with the numbers. I mean, when I was in the business and working, I could stay on top of them. I don't even want to try and stay on top. I'm trying to build a garage and I think I've just been priced out of it. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, there is no staying on top of them anymore.
Okay.
You can't do estimates fast enough.
Okay.
You get it ready and get it ready to send out, and the next day price is already, it's crazy right now.
Okay. Son of a
Hey,
gun.
Mark, if
sir.
Mylan has a bunch of ideas or information, any idea what form it's in? Is it something that could be sent out to each of us to take a look at and see what some of his thoughts are on this?
Yeah, I think it's a Word document. I'll reach out to him again and see if I can get some of that stuff. And if he hasn't already forwarded it to everybody, let's see if he can get it forwarded to everybody or get it to me and I'll make sure it gets to everybody. But I think that's a great idea. Let's get it all out to everybody again. So that's, and again, it may be, we use 100% of what he suggests, 20% of what he suggests, somewhere in the middle, but at least it's something to look at so we can kind of make some effort to move forward on this. So, oh boy, yeah. Ted just scared me off here. Yeah.
It's a shit. Well, and I really, I'm obviously overemphasizing it for importance, but
Yeah.
but it is right now. Construction is just it's hard to estimate things right now. And some costs we can't see come in about where we expect them, and other times they're so far off the mark, you just shake your head.
Yeah, but at least we know.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So that being said, we've got the subcommittee that is, I believe it's Mylan, Dave Peterson, and I believe Dave Stones is part of that. Will I just have those folks continue to work with staff on that? And I've got, I'm the guy with all the free time, so I don't mind getting involved to whatever you guys feel you want to use me for. So other than I take a few trips out of town a couple of times a year, I'm pretty available.
Yeah, I'm starting a new job on the 14th. So my time will be somewhat limited and I'll be traveling as part of that job.
So I certainly don't mind in. And another thought on that, Wayne, I mean, you're pretty involved from the planning commission perspective anyway. It may not be a bad idea if we kind of involved you a little bit. I don't want to put more work on you, but if we were to involve you a little bit, because you're going to be working with it a lot anyway, as far as the planning perspective portion of all this. So your thoughts on that, and you don't have to answer tonight. If you just want to give some thought, that'd be great.
No, I'm fine. If there's some things that that you feel because of position on a planning commission I can help with or do some further looking at or into, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Well, I know going forward, if we if in fact, and I'm 99% certain that the council is going to approve this, but let's just go under the prefaces that the council is going to approve this stormwater study. That's going to involve a lot of planning anyway, so you would be deeply involved in that by default, no matter what.
Sure, and it'll help us to identify maybe areas around the city where, when it comes point, if it's where Summit Creek is doing development, that we know there's added attention that needs to be given to certain locations by Summit Creek development. We can point that out to them and make sure that we're working with them to address a potential problem before it occurs. So it's important.
Okay, perfect. If there's nothing else on that, I'm prepared to move on to the next item on the agenda, but any thoughts before we move on?
The only thing, Jody sent us a copy of that LEI storm drain study from 2012. As was mentioned, it's pretty sparse, but for this particular task, it's actually pretty useful because they identified several areas within the city that are known problem areas. So anyway, it could be useful. So I'll forward it to Mark, and you can pass it on to whomever needs it.
Sure thing. Appreciate it. Thanks, Dave.
I have to run, Mark, unless there's any other questions on the stormwater stuff.
I probably not. Not Ted. We appreciate your joining us. I know that you've join us on a regular basis and you contribute just like you're part of the group. As you know, as far as I'm concerned, you really never left. So I appreciate it, Wayne, or Ted, excuse me. Thanks for joining us and have a good night.
Thanks, you guys.
So next on the list, I'll look up my agenda here, is Public Works priorities for 2022 and 2023. Again, these are priorities that may or may not cost some money, and the council and finance committee are going to have to take a look at these as well. So I just kind of wanted to get some stuff out there so that if the council wants to look at them, they have the information now rather than getting it in March or April when they're trying to put the budget together. So Corbett and I sat down, he kind of went over a lot of the things that he felt were important. I would say that most of these, I think, except for just a couple items, were also brought up last year, and there wasn't any room in the budget last year because we had a lot of challenge. So kind of maybe readdressing them this year. And so I kind of sent everybody, I think everybody got the list I sent out the other day, excuse me, talking about this, and kind of Corbett's name's pretty much attached to everything. And then like, for example, item number 1 on this priority list is continued water rights update. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Corbett and Wayne on that, if you guys don't mind. And it's probably going to be more you, Wayne, than Corbett. But anyway, please, if you can, give us some insights on how you feel about that.
I'll defer to
Specific-
Wayne.
Okay. Specifically on the water rights, the analysis that we've done or had done and reviewed it shows that there's the city needs to update our water rights with the state for use of the water. We have sufficient water, so that's not an issue, but we're actually using more water than we have.
Certificated, I believe is the term.
Yes, certificated is the right word. So I've talked to Ted, and this is something that Jones and DeMille routinely does for clients that they have. So they're reviewing which of our water rights would be best to have certificated, and they're supposed to get back to us then with a cost to do that, to go through that process. So again, it's not a matter of not having enough water rights. We do, but we're using more than we have certificated. So that's a process. It's kind of ongoing, depending upon the homes that we have being built and the needs that the city has as to how much water we are using. So
Okay, just a quick, I think most of you know, in my working life, I was general manager of a water conservancy district. And that was a challenge that, was an annual challenge as an agency grows or, an entity grows, they've got the water rights, approved water rights, but not necessarily certificated. And as you start growing into those water rights, you do need to go ahead and get it certificated so that you're showing proof of use on it. And we always budgeted X amount of dollars per year to do that. Of course, we were a water district. That was really all we did. And so we knew that, okay, X amount of dollars each fiscal year to do that. And so we were able to keep on top of it. And I think that's something that we can look at here on a much smaller scale. Maybe we only have to look at doing it once every 3 or 4 years instead of once every year. But as Wayne pointed out, I apologize for reiterating that, was we do have a bunch of water that is approved, but we are actually, and we have a certain amount that is certificated, but we are actually using more water than we have certificated. So we need to come back and look at that and get what the difference between what we're using and what we have certificated. So we need to come back and do that. And it may be something we need to do again in another 3 or 4 years.
yeah, as soon as I get the budget figure from Ted with Jones and DeMille, for their cost in doing that, then I'll be further talking to the council about it and hopefully set that money aside this year for that work to be done. So like Mark said, it's not in every, if we were growing exponentially, it would probably be an every year thing, but I think it's been about 3 years since we did that. And so, and it's something we need to do, but the state gives a lot of latitude to cities and municipalities in the water arena. So they're not jumping down our neck or anything yet. And again, we have sufficient water. So it's more of an administrative process that we go through that helps the state keep and understand what cities are actually using. So,
Corbett, anything you want to add?
Not on water rights. No,
Okay.
I think it's awesome.
Perfect. So that way, that was one of the items on the list we wanted to present to the council and to the finance folks. Another one, this one is going to be Corbett, the completion of the Broad Hollow well. I think there's some unfinished items that he'd like to look at getting done. And I'll go ahead and let you give us an overview on that, if you don't mind, Corbett.
So the Broad Hollow well, we brought the Broad Hollow well online in September of 2018, right before the fires. I mean, well, we started it up, made sure it worked and everything. And then after the fires, we brought it online, and it's been online ever since. It's been our sole source of water ever since. That's been giving us some good data, hopefully long-term data. I just recently worked a thing out with the consultant that we used on the well and got an increase in the safe yield from Division of Water Rights. That's all been finalized and official. But as far as completing the well, everything works and everything is operational, but there's duct work that still needs to be done. There's handrail that still needs to be installed, built and installed. The back half of the basement on the building is a fuel vault that I haven't had the time to finish yet. And so there's a few things. We have most of the material. It's just a matter of the time and being able to get it done. But again, everything is operational. So, you know, I don't want to paint a bleak picture that there's things that have to be done. It's more or less cosmetic, and then finalizing the generator, for instance, things that would be nice to have that we haven't had in the past, but would be nice to have, you know, as we can get them done.
Now, this, Corbett, this may be a Chris question. I know that we had some leftover funds from the bond on the well. I know we used at least some of those on the road. Do you know if there's any money still available for that?
I don't think so. I think we closed that bond out. That's why, I mean, for instance, that's why all the fuel tanks are up there on the ground, because Division of Drinking Water wanted to close out the bond. And so we bought the fuel tanks, even though we weren't ready to install them. I have the secondary containment or the rubber membrane. It's up there on the floor inside the well house. I just haven't had time to install it. So we got all the material for the most part. We got all the material needed to finish it. It's just now labor to get it done.
So really minimal cost to complete it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why we did it that way.
Okay, perfect.
That's why
All
we
right.
did it. So number 3, you want me to just keep going?
Sure, let's
Hey,
go ahead.
Corbett.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just speaking to that is, and I know labor's hard to get right now, but is that something that we could hire out?
Well, I mean, I'm a cheap sucker. You know, I'd much rather use it as a filler and not pay any extra. But, you know, if it's something that you guys want done, I budget for the labor to do everything that I can every year. And so if you guys don't want to wait, if those things are important enough to you that you don't want to wait and you want to pay somebody else to do it, then I'm fine with that.
Well,
Well, let me ask you a question. Are we saying that if right now we lost power in the city, we would also more or less be without water?
No, I've got a generator up there. It just won't run the pump at full speed. I mean, I can get the 100,000 watt generator we got up there that's on the trailer. I can get you about 500 gallons a minute out of it, but I can't run it at the 700 gallons a minute that it takes if you're running it at full speed. So no, I mean, No. I mean, 2 hours, true, well, not 2 hours, but I could jerry rig the generator that's up there and plug it in like we did before to be able to run it at full speed as well. It's just not a final and complete installation if the cord's running across the ground instead of through a conduit through the wall like it's intended to be.
So along those lines, Corbett, so if we did have a power emergency for whatever reason, we could actually run and get 80% of our capacity out of the pump, and we could put a word out to the community, hey, no outside water use under this emergency situation, only indoor water or stuff like that, and get by.
I would never do that again. As soon as you tell people that, they start filling up their bathtubs.
Okay, well, yeah, but
People
they
go
only put
crazy.
40 gallons in a bathtub. I mean, how many bathtubs? do they have?
Bathtubs and
know.
RVs.
I know, but I'd lots rather deal with it and 500 gallons a minute, especially at this time of year. Right now, your average use right now, I don't know if any of you, Mark, you saw that report.
Yeah,
Right now, your daily use is 92 gallons a minute, citywide. Now, in the summertime,
considerably more, yeah.
that ramps up to about 1,700 gallons a minute. And so there's a huge difference. But that 1,700 GPM is only for the evening hours when you're running your sprinklers. Right now, you're not running your sprinklers, and the average now is only 92 gallons a minute.
Which is kind of my point. If we had let's say we had a fire emergency that took out the transformers at the well for whatever reason, I'm just coming up with this possible scenario. We could still supply the community. The way we're set up right now, we could still supply the community with sanitary drinking water.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't solve the problem that you're discussing, but I think that addresses Dave's concern is, are we going to run dry if there was a power outage right now? I think that's
No.
okay. I think
No,
Dave, that's
not at
what you were going to ask you about.
I mean, right
Well-
now, realize that right now the pump comes on for 2.5 hours every 3 days. That's all the water that we use through the wintertime.
Welcome to wintertime in Utah. Okay.
So no, it's not critical. Those are things that would be nice to get done. But if they're important enough to you guys that you want to get them done right now, then yeah, we can contract it out.
Yeah, I mean, just so you understand, I'm not concerned.
Okay.
It was more, I want to know what are the consequences of not acting, and that helps me prioritize our actions.
Yeah,
And
that's why it's not done right now, is because it's not a high priority on my list. It's something that needs to be done.
Yeah, we're paying
Yeah.
attorney salaries now instead of contracting out for other services.
Yeah. Speaking of flushing sewer operations, there's where some money's going. Okay.
Okay, so item number 3, well monitoring. Anything that I've done up there, obviously I try to keep a big picture in mind. When I ran the line to tie the tanks together, I threw extra conduit in the trench as I went past that old well that we're going to use for a monitoring well. I just need somebody to help me figure it out, because that takes time. And Mark, I look to you mostly. If you could help me figure out what it takes to get the well monitoring done. The conduit is there, the well is there. All we got to do is figure out what it takes to drop something in the ground to be able to make it work and tie it in.
I'd
And
be
we're
more
good to go.
happy to work with that, but if I may follow up a little bit, this is more of a pet project for me. I don't know, maybe it's the old hippie from Moab in me talking, but I'd like to see, because it's not only us that's using the water, it's the whole south end of the valley. Especially on the lower wells. I talked with, as you can say, Hugh Harlow, he's with the Utah Geological Survey. I had a lengthy discussion with him about this last year. And, the information is sketchy at best. Is how much water do we really have? Are we drawing water out of our aquifer faster? Are we recharging it, which is, the term is called mining water, as I'm sure most of you are aware. Are we doing that? We really don't know. It's not been a problem. Corbett, when you start the wells, the lower wells, the other wells, you've got the cone of influence or cone of depletion that you're measuring and the recovery, but what's it doing to the whole aquifer, a mile away or a half, 2 miles away or 3 miles away? We got the whole mountain. How is that being affected, not only by us, but by everybody? So it's going to go up and down, as time water, winter time, it's going to recharge a little bit. In the summertime, it's going to go down. The question is, it's like a yo-yo. Are we walking on flat land with a yo-yo, or are we walking downhill with a yo-yo to the point where, it's not going to come up to where it once did? And this is a long-term 20-25 year monitoring process we need to get in place, so that as we start doing our planning, and the rest of the valley for that matter, is how much water is out there. Are we drawing down? What are the effects of climate change, for lack of a better choice of words? Are we maintaining our aquifer? Or are we drawing it down? And I think if we're drawing it down, we'd rather know that sooner than later. And so I think just a simple probe, even if it's just a drop line with a little beeper on it, sounder probe, just something that we can start recording, and this is going to go on, 8, 10, 12, 20 years before we start seeing any patterns on this. But I think the sooner we get started with it, the better for our community, the better our community will be for it. So that's kind of a, more of a pet project that I think is important. I'm not sure how everybody else feels about it, but it's something we can do for, a reasonable cost. And at the same time, I think it's very valuable data.
I think I'm doing what I can along that line. I don't think apparently you haven't had a chance to read that water report I sent.
I did. But again, that's that's really at our well, but it's not the whole aquifer, the whole.
With what we have,
Yeah.
I'm monitoring as much as I can with what I have, but obviously if we could expand that and get further away from the well where we're drawing the water, it's going to make that much bigger of a difference, and better data.
David, I think you were going to say something.
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, you got your hand up.
Number 4, we want to keep moving.
Sure.
Sewer operations. I think that's more of an anticipation of what Payson's planning or what they're going to do to us. Payson put it on the back burner, and I really don't want to bring it up until we need to. Obviously, I think we need to be aware of it. The last conversations I had with Payson, Dave Tuckett is the Payson city manager. He was their attorney. But Dave Tuckett does not want to clean our sewer. Now, the contract that we have with Payson City, Bob Otley was working with Payson, trying to work something out. Dave Tuckett is the one that wrote that contract. Dave Tuckett is very convinced that they can get out of it. They don't want to do that because they know what it does for us, but they want us to work with them. But again, right now, they're not talking about it. They've got bigger things to do than deal with us. And so it's kind of been put on their back burner, which inadvertently puts it on our back burner too.
Okay.
Unless we want to kick that hornet's nest.
Well, real quick on that, as far as, our sewer within our community, our main lines that go into the Payson trunk. I don't know if we go into a separate trunk line or if we got a dedicated line. I'm not sure how that system works, but I think for me is have we done cleaning and inspecting? I realize it was probably part of Payson's contract, but what is it actually? Regardless of who is required to clean it, how clean is it right now? I mean, I don't want to deal with backups because we thought it was Payson's fault or Payson's responsibility instead of our responsibility. That would be one concern for me is, is it a clean, safe operation right now? So I don't want,
We just had it cleaned and cameraed last summer.
Okay.
Payson did it. It took a long time because they didn't just concentrate on that. They used it as a filler for the 2 crews that came up and did it. But we've got the data. That's the first time it's ever been done since it was brought into service, but it's only been in service for 3 years. And so, there were a couple of trouble spots that they had identified already that we'll need to keep an eye on. But we're not into it far enough and we certainly don't have enough use to to worry too much about it right now, other than a couple of spots, and that's it.
And you're
Corbett,
aware-
was the problem with those couple of spots, was it a design problem? Or what was the genesis of the problem? Just briefly.
Installation. Bellies in the
some-
pipe, bellies in the pipe, and that's, I mean, they were on flat lines. I mean, relatively flat, I mean, 0.3%. And so they're pretty flat lines.
Is that something that falls to us or to the developer when they're, and our engineers when they're, putting that in and inspecting it?
Well, the developer has gone into default, so yeah,
I
it's
know.
now ours. It's ours now.
So,
Okay.
but I think moving forward, it's something that is, it would be installed, accepted. You can run a mandrel or a sonar now, I guess you can run whatever you want to do to ensure that it's proper. And then come back a year later to make sure that everything is as it should be before you accept it. Once the city accepts it, then it usually will become the city's responsibility
Correct.
to own it. There are some other consequences to having sags in your line. And it means every time you have a low spot, there's going to be usually an associated high spot. And the high spots tend to collect a sewer gas. Sewer gas can be explosive. So that on the other, on the flip side, that's why it's almost as important to have it. It's almost as critical to make sure you don't have any high spots as you do low spots. So, and they kind of go hand in hand. So it could very well be that wherever we have the low spots, we know where they're marked, we know where they're at. And if we have to, we flush them once, 6 months a year, depending on what it looks like.
We've got one spot in town that due to low or no flow, it backs up every 11 months to a year. And so it's on a schedule. We flush it every 6 months just to make sure. It's 10 weeks. We flush it every 6 months to make sure that it doesn't back up.
Okay.
But yeah, there's issues. We know what most of them are. Others are issues in that were found with the jetting and cameraing that Payson did, but they're in parts that are in areas that aren't being used at all right now. And so it's not an issue.
So one more quick question as we looking at this. In our sewer enterprise or billing
No
fund,
such
do we
thing.
have any money at all that the city holds out to pay for that, or is it being paid for out either the general fund or the water fund? I mean, so how is the time spent and equipment spent doing this paid for, I guess is my question.
We don't have a sewer enterprise fund. We collect a sewer fee, and we get a little bit of an administrative fee in that. But other than that, it all goes to Payson.
Okay,
So a sewer enterprise fund is going to be more critical as the responsibility to maintain the system becomes ours. And that's when Payson drops us.
and it's that, and I just think that's something that the council needs to be aware of. How they deal with it is going to be the council's call, but at least I think they at least need to know about it to help them make their decision on how they want to deal with it.
Right.
I'm as bad as it would be, I'm not as bugged if they drop us from a maintenance perspective. I mean, yes, it's going to cost us some money, but I'd be really bugged if they dropped us from a destination perspective.
Well, and that's their leverage to get, I think, this is just me thinking, that's their leverage to get us to take care of our own sewer is you either just take care of the O&M or you're going to take care of the treatment also. And we can't do that. There's no way.
Which makes me wonder if we might need to start cozying up a bit to Salem.
The state would get involved in a situation like that. We had a very similar situation down in Grand County where we were at in the county, we had a contract with the city of Moab, and we got into a because we're talking sewer, I guess it's safe to say pissing contest with them. And the state actually intervened in that and said, you guys are gonna have to learn to play together with this one because this is, it's an environmental hazard. So the state, at least in the past, has got involved in those types of disputes. I'd rather not get into a dispute with them, but should it happen, the state would probably get involved in that as well.
Oh, yeah. And Payson's not, They're not terminating the contract, at least not yet.
No.
And I think before they did that, they would just tell us, look, you take care of your own, jetting and cleaning, maintenance, or take care of your own treatment and jetting and cleaning.
And they probably need the flows to pay their bills too. So
Yeah, I don't know.
Corbett, to be clear, the contract does specify right now that Payson will clean it and maintain it, right?
Correct.
They're
Yeah, and
just
that's
trying to
the
get out of
issue.
it.
That's the issue. They don't get enough money out of it because they're only getting $3 a month on 30 or 40 connections. And that $120 a month, even for 12 months a year, doesn't pay
one
for
trip out.
a jetting crew and a camera crew to come up here and spend 60 or 80 hours each. They can't afford to.
Yeah, but
So-
should we be collecting more money then in behalf of Payson to at least break even with that aspect of what they're doing?
That's a hot potato.
Well, I know it, but it's a fact or it could be a fact if
Well, the catch 22 is, and we've had this discussion in council meeting a bunch, is we need to, really what we need to do is increase the take rate. That's kind of the ultimate solution, is just get more people on that sewer instead of traditional septic tanks. The county wants that, we want that, everybody wants it. The hard part is right now the city has, and I can't remember exactly what the connection fee is, but it's pretty significant. And so if you've got a septic tank, there's no incentive to go to the sewer.
And David, when you say connection fee, you mean impact fee?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, to me, that's the same because it's the cost it's going to cost you to connect. So yeah, there's the impact fee, there's whatever other fees are involved. It's expensive to connect to the sewer. It's way better for your house once you do, but it's expensive.
How
but
is
it's
it way
more
better for your house,
expensive to
David?
put a septic in than it is to connect to the sewer. The problem
No,
is the sewer, just a connection fee. The problem is the sewer is not run throughout the city. I understood that the connection fee was like $2,500 or so.
It is.
And a septic, you're looking at close to 10 grand.
That
a
is
septic
true,
system.
Wayne, but that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about are existing homes. New construction has to connect. They don't get a choice.
Right,
Right.
but
So-
existing
so for
homes
instance-
don't have sewer running down the front of their property. So
Some do.
Every
Some
city,
do.
every city that we researched before we did what we did on Loafer and Eagle Nest, whatever, before we did what we did, the research said that every city has a requirement to connect to the sewer, and those requirements are different from city to city. As soon as that sewer main, in some cities, as soon as that sewer main is within 250 feet, you got to connect. Others,
It's 300 feet is what the state, at least is what it was. It may very well have changed since I left, but it was within 300 feet unless there was some reasonable condition that caused it not to happen. But anytime you were within 300 feet of a sewer, you had to connect. And that,
Yeah, so the worst we saw was 250 feet. The worst we saw was 500 feet. If the sewer main was within 500 feet of your property line, you had to go get it, the sewer main itself, bring it to you and to the furthest extent of your property. And you had to connect. The best one was 200 or 250 feet. So they were all over the place. Sometimes they required it when you sold the house. The new owner had to comply with either connecting or going and getting it if they were close enough and bringing it and extending it as well as connecting to it. So, but the city council's got to make that decision to require the connection, the paying the impact fee, plus whatever it costs you to get it from the street, if that's where it's at, to your house. Now, Thousand Oaks, everything in Thousand Oaks was supposed to have the dry sewer connected to the house, but not physically connected to the house. They had to run it into the house and have the ability to transition to that public sewer when it was available.
And
And
I
so
would,
Thousand
I'm
Oaks
sorry.
is a lot better off.
and I
Sure.
would recommend caution when doing that. For instance, I've been here for, 28, 29 years. To tell me, hey, you have to spend X amount of money to do that and rip up your driveway to bring it in, 200 feet into your house is a pretty significant thing to do to impose upon someone who doesn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, just to
I
be
agree.
clear, we're not talking about places where the sewer line is not run. That's not what we're talking about. So there is no sewer line down Oak. Nobody on Oak can connect.
Right,
What we're
but the point
talking
is
about
that
is we're
at some
talking
point,
about Loafer, certainly Eagle's Nest, all that, and
Everything in Thousand Oaks.
yeah, everything in Thousand Oaks can connect. And Corbett, I'm curious, are there any homes in Thousand Oaks that have not connected?
Oh, yeah. I'll bet you haven't got 20% that have connected. 80% are not connected.
Really?
Interesting.
Not
Wow.
connected as in on sewer, on septic?
They're still on septic.
Okay.
so I understood that, Councilman Pratt. What I was getting to was if the city makes a decision to impose that upon people retroactively after they've already built their homes, and the city decides that, hey, let's go ahead and put one down Oak, that would be an awfully big thing to put upon an existing homeowner to say, hey, go ahead and rip up your driveway for a couple hundred feet and pay the monthly fee as well as the connection fee. That would be fairly significant. So I was just urging caution in those discussions because that's a significant amount that's not an insignificant amount of money.
Yeah, just so you know, I understand that. And I don't ever think the city would do that. If it came to that, that would be the county that is, or the state that's coming after us and making us do that. I mean, crud. I'd be even in worse shape because my stuff don't go uphill. And, just to even get it to the street, I'd have to go significantly uphill.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Well, I don't want to diverge, but that's an interesting conversation, though.
But anyways, so sewer operations, I don't know that it's an issue as far as taking care of our own. Right now, Payson is under contract to do it. And so I think we just play that by ear and see where it goes. They're not going to threaten us. They're going to ask us and they're going to give us some options. And I guess you could look at that as a threat. But for right now, everything seems to be okay.
So what I think I'm hearing you say is for the time being, let's just let that dog lie.
Well, I think the city council needs to do some kind of an enterprise fund. And at least get that started. It's not going to go away. Payson just isn't pushing it right now. And so if we want to wait till Payson pushes, then let's wait. If we want to get ahead of the curve, then let's at least start considering it. I mean, I'll present it to the city council as we start doing budget talks, but I don't know that it's a high priority right now. Number 5, can we move on?
Sure.
Number 5, safety. I've talked about it before, about adding on to the city center, about doing a new building. I'll keep talking about it. I'm not going to push real hard if people don't want it, but I think there's wisdom in it as far as seeing it through. If somebody wants to help me push it, then let's, I'm looking for a volunteer.
Now you're talking about what again, for clarification?
Adding on to the building for
Oh, you're talking about waste oil and vehicle storage.
well, vehicle storage. Well, oh yeah, I skipped it. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's go back to safety. We have an employee handbook. I don't know how much of that employee handbook was dedicated to safety. I've not even read it yet, so I don't know what to do to speak to that. If anybody else has got any input, I think it'd be helpful. Every year we're required, well, the Utah League of Cities and Towns offer, or maybe it's the trust. It is the trust. The trust offers an insurance premium rebate, and it's free money. And so as long as we jump through the hoops, then they give us, it might be a 3% or a 5% rebate on our premiums if we hold the safety meetings, if we, comply with OSHA inspections. And so not that you ever want to, but I want that money. And so I call OSHA, and OSHA comes down and does their inspection. They give us a list. I comply with the list. And as long as we hold the safety meetings, then we fill out the form and the trust gives us the money. It's generally about $1,500 to $2,000,
So
but it's free money, basically. just by doing it.
for me, the trust rebates and the trust training are great, but for me, it's about the personnel. Okay, it's about you, Corbett. It's about the folks that work for you. It's about the residents that volunteer their time and everything. That I think is the utmost important. We want you to be safe, not only because you're a valuable employee, because it's the right thing to do, is to make sure that people that are working in our community are going to be okay. But then again, it also gets back to liability. I hate to bring that word up, but that was our attorney's favorite statement. It's all about the liability. If we have a policy that is a good policy that we may be able to get from the trust or from the League of City and Town, and we implement that policy, and everybody gets a copy of it and signs that they have a copy of that, and then there is somebody that gets hurt, and it turns out that they weren't working within the rules of that policy, then it takes some of the liability off the community. So I hate to make it all about the liability, but first, most important, I want to make it about you guys. So I think if we could find, and it may be in there, you may be right, it may be in there that if there's a policy that's already in our employee handbook, great. If not, it may be just say, hey, let's go to the Leagues of City and Town, say, hey, you guys have a policy that we could use as a blueprint, and modify it a little bit to fit our needs, and just add that chapter to it. And I think
Any volunteers? Any volunteers?
If you're looking at me, yeah, I'll volunteer to do it.
You're on.
I don't mind. I'll take that if you want. Because that's
Please.
Safety's, there's just nothing more important to me.
No, I agree. It'd be helpful. It's just, it's just not very high up on my list.
To me, it's a whole lot easier to explain why you didn't get something done than it is to explain why somebody got hurt trying to get it done. So I'd be happy to take that on if
You're on. You're on. You got it.
Okay.
All right. Number 6, waste oil, heat, and vehicle storage. I've brought this up before. I'll keep bringing it up unless somebody wants to shoot it down and tell me to spend my time someplace else. But I've talked about it in city council meetings. COVID is not our friend. We have an opportunity to save about 13% on a boiler, as long as we make that call before, I think it's the end of March. I haven't told Chris this yet, so I need to talk to Chris, but Energy Logic has a contract with Napa Auto that they will hold their price through, I think it's through March. And so I've talked to Glenn Wood. He's the owner of Napa over in Payson. And that's the cheapest boiler I have found yet. But we can save about 13% on the cost of a boiler if we buy it before then. We don't have to. I see us spending $8,000 a year on natural gas, and that's just for the gas. That doesn't count the other fees that Dominion gets you for, but that's $8,000 a year just for gas. I listen to the radio, and the radio is telling you that you're going to see a 50% increase in home heating. That means that if that goes through, that we'll be spending about $12,000 a year for gas. And I think we could do a lot with 12 grand a year to try to heat the building like it is right now and even into the future. Somebody needs to be willing to pull the trigger.
But if you put together the figures that the difference between continuing to use the natural gas versus the broiler and the oil, and presented those to the council, I think
It's
I
been
think
a
they have
while.
the full figures. Pardon?
It's been a while since I have.
Okay, you've got a new council kind of in place now too, so it might be a good idea to resurrect that and present it to the council, particularly if you've got some deadlines here with possibly getting a broiler that's available.
I guess one of the questions I have is, does this group have any concerns at all with using waste oil to heat the building?
The only concern I have, it has nothing to do with waste oil. It's just anytime you change the source, anyway, it's kind of a hard game to play because who knows, in 5 years, heating oil could be way more expensive than natural gas, or waste oil could be more expensive.
True.
So anyway, there's that risk that you always have whenever you switch from one source to another.
I guess a question from me to you two, Ben and David. Would you guys like to see something? I know you're just two of the council, but would you like to see a presentation on this that gets, I mean, I've met with DEQ, I've met with the waste oil division, I've met with underground storage tank division. I mean, it was just a phone call for me, and these guys are more than willing to leave the office and drive down to Woodland Hills and walk through the building. Nebo School District is willing to give us a 10-year contract that they will give us their oil. And the biggest stipulation to that contract is they want us to take it all. They don't want us to they don't want to deal with having somebody come for 1,000 gallons or 500 gallons here and there. They want us to take it all. And for me, the only difference that means is if I've got to burn off some oil, I open the bay doors or I turn on the snow melt and I just heat up the concrete slab outside. I mean, I don't want to minimize it too much, but
what about during the summer, Corbett?
Well, Nebo has 180 school buses, and they change the oil in those buses 13 gallons a pop on a regular basis so that their mechanics stay busy year round. So they produce between 480 and 500 gallons every single month. Now, the numbers that I got for the building as it is would require, for the same amount of gas, would require anywhere between 3,500 and 4,200 gallons of waste oil to heat the building and replace the natural gas that we've been using since 2012. And that's as far back as I went with on the numbers. The state will allow us unlimited storage. And the only stipulation is those tanks have to be maximum 1,000 gallons apiece, and they have to be fully inspectable. And so I think I've got all those details. I haven't given all of those details to everybody just because I haven't had time to share them. But I've gone through all of those details, and I've talked to Craig. Craig has looked up the fire code and the restrictions or the requirements associated with waste oil. And waste oil is non-volatile. You can pass an open flame across a bucket of oil and it's not going to ignite, unlike a can of gas. And so the requirements are a lot less restrictive. Again, the state says as long as it's inspectable, maximum 1,000 gallon containers, there is no limit. And I know that sounds crazy, but we don't have enough. I mean, if we burn 3,500 on the low side, if we only burn 3,500 and Nebo produces 5,000 gallons, we got a plus 1,500 gallons every year. That's a tank and a half.
So Corbett, when you say inspectable, does that mean they have to be above ground? They cannot be in the ground?
They can be in a vault as long as they're inspectable. But if they're below ground and they're buried to where they're not inspectable, then that falls under underground storage tanks, and it's a whole can of worms. I mean, you guys hear about the gas stations that have a leak and they dump fuel into the ground for years and years and years, and then it becomes an environmental nightmare. That's because of underground storage tanks or storage tanks that are high in volume. So if they're 1,000 gallons or less and you can inspect them, which means you can walk over the tank, you can see a leak. If the tank's leaking and it's into your secondary containment and you see a puddle on the ground, that kind of a tank, you can address the leak. If it's an underground storage tank and it's leaking into the dirt, you're screwed.
The
And
reason
so-
why I asked that was because about 15 to 20 years ago, I looked into using the waste oil or the reconditioned oil, you throw it through the spin or whatnot, for doing a snow melt on my drive. I have a long driveway and I would love to do that. And I actually looked into it. So if the city decides they want to move forward and the city and the school district saying you have to take it, I may just have an extra 1,000-gallon tank you could dump a little extra into, just simply because I'd looked into that quite a while back, and I was thoroughly very much in favor of that, because it was just I run a hot water boiler in my house. I'd run a second hot water boiler just for all the snow removal, and I think that'd be fantastic.
Well, and so it wouldn't be hard to do. It really wouldn't, but
No.
I can't spend that kind of money, and I need somebody to help push it and pull the trigger is all. I mean, when Bob Fisher, I've been talking about this for a long time. In fact, if you go in the city office, you'll see four Army tanks, or they call them Buffalo tanks,
Yes.
in the boiler room. That's from Steve Lauritsen. So Steve approved it. He liked the idea. He wanted to go through with it. And so we started, but we never got far enough to spend the money to buy the boiler. Well,
What help do you need, Corbett?
council approval.
So in other words, not anything from someone like a lowly member of the.
Well, I
Public Works Committee.
think to put the information together, I've got all the information. To put that information together in a presentable format to the city council, something that the residents can pick apart if they want to. I mean, Bob Fisher talked about ghosts in the oil. The EPA, their preferred way to get rid of waste oil is, number one, is burn it on site.
Yeah.
Don't transport it. Don't, burn it on site. Number two is transport it as little as possible and burn it. And so
Yeah.
this is what the state prefers. The state throws out incentives. They give you gloves. They give you all kinds of swag just to get you to take people's waste oil instead of dumping it on the ditch bank in the backyard.
I think that maybe you and I can talk a little bit about this outside the meeting.
All right.
I do have, you were asking about some concerns or something. I don't know. I have probably a lot of questions I haven't even thought of yet, but two that jump out at me right off the top of my head is, number one, if the city were to convert to waste oil, does the natural gas system still stay in place? So if we wanted to convert back, we could do that with minimal effort or no effort at all? Or can we use
Absolutely.
dual fuel if needed be? Okay.
Absolutely.
And the other one, the big one for me would be integrity of the oil. How do we know that what we're getting hasn't been contaminated prior to us getting it? Somebody dumps a gallon of antifreeze in there, it's contaminated oil. So that would be, I got a dog that wants out. So that would be one of my.
Let me cover that.
Okay, sure thing.
I would keep the natural gas, number one, because it's already paid for, it's already in place. It's a perfect backup. Don't use it if you don't have to. And that's why the numbers that I'm using are only for the gas that we burn. And so that $8,000 a year, that's only the gas that we burn. That's
And
the
not,
only
the
thing-
connection fee is not included in that number.
No, not at
Okay.
all. Nor are the other fee. That's why I say
Perfect, okay.
the other fees, the meter charges, whatever else Dominion gets you for, all those are, I'm still planning on paying all of those.
Okay,
Now, as far as the quality of the oil, Nebo School District has committed that they will offer, or that they will provide what the state calls a generator certification.
okay.
Which means
perfect,
that the
perfect.
guy that generates the oil certifies that the only thing that's there is motor oil. Now, Nebo doesn't use solvents. They use a steam pressure washer for parts cleaning in the bus shop. And so they don't even have solvents in the bus shop. I mean, they're regulated by these guys too, but they will offer a generator certification. There's a simple test that can be done on site. But the requirement from DEQ is that before you can burn that oil has to be certified as being on specification.
So the oil we get would be certified.
Well, it would have a generator certification, but you still have to certify the oil. But it's a no-brainer as long as you know that there's nothing else in it.
Okay.
And so it's a hoop you got to jump through. You lock the tanks that you're going to use, that you're going to certify. You take a sample. It costs you $50. You get a sample, and if you've taken a representative sample of 5,000 gallons, then those tanks are ready to go for the winter coming up. You don't have to do anything else with them. You've already certified them as being on specification.
Okay, that's two of the many questions I have. I just don't know what the rest of them are at this point.
Hey,
Okay, thank you.
Corbett's walking
Anybody,
me through
I'm
that.
offering-
Dave and
offering
Ben, I would
anybody-
suggest that if you have an opportunity to grab Corbett one of these first days and let him take you down there and show you what our heating system looks like and talk to you more about this. It's impressive.
Corbett, I am,
Yes.
I'm between jobs.
Sorry,
I just gave my 2-week notice on last Friday. And they said, hey, fantastic, see you later. We'll pay you for your 2 weeks, go by. So I have 2 weeks that I can actually spend some time, go down there and take a look at that. And I did, is your cell number still 801-857-0788?
Yep.
Okay, if you can let me know when you might be available, I'll make myself available. And I'd love to take a look at that.
8 o'clock in the morning
What morning?
tomorrow.
Sounds great.
I mean, just tell you what, I'm there Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday. You call when it's convenient for you, and I'll tell you if I can or can't. If I've got something I can't get out of, then I'll let you know.
So I meet you where tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
You got a 9 o'clock meeting, Corbett, reminder.
Tomorrow.
Yes, staff meeting.
Oh, can we do it at 11?
Let me check. I do have a couple meetings for onboarding my new client, new job.
Nice.
I will, if your number's still that cell number,
Yeah.
I'll just text you.
It is.
You're starting to sound like a Geico commercial now.
Whatever.
Corbett and I have
Like I
been
said,
talking
I've
about
been
this
interested in this
few
for
years,
a couple
so-
of decades. I've actually done quite a bit of research on this, and including looking at oil suppliers that were friends of mine that would just basically put it in a centrifuge and clean it up and let me burn it. And I'm sick of shoveling snow. I'm very interested in this.
Well, you got a source that's free. All you
Yes.
got to do is pick it up.
Well,
And I
he sold it, so I don't have that anymore.
Well, I think it's a no-brainer. It just takes presenting it and getting financial support.
Right.
Corbett, if you
That's
can
the
get that
mechanical engineer in me.
presentation going, I think that sounds like a great idea. You and I have been talking about this for years.
Yeah.
And so I don't have any problems, as long as we can get a good presentation. The public hearing will be a good thing for this as well, because I assume we'll probably need to do something like that. Pratt can correct me there if I need to be corrected, but
Not on this.
I think no. Perfect.
No, because this isn't
I think
a
it's a great
this isn't
idea.
a land use issue. This is anyway.
Yeah,
But
as
if-
long as
if-
there's not a big, huge black smokestack sticking out the top of the city building, I think we should be good.
It'll be cleaner than natural gas.
So I'm without me doing more research, which I'd plan on doing, I got your back on this one.
All right. Anybody think of anything, any concerns, questions? I mean, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email or a text, and I'll be glad to answer questions that you have, or if you're talking to people, I was talking, this is long enough ago that I was talking with Jack Marshall. And between Jack and Bob Fisher and their background in oil, this is crazy to not to, when we have a source that is so plentiful and available as Nebo School District. I mean, even worst case, you could buy oil and have it delivered that's on specification and cut your heating bills in half.
Corbett, one more question. Obviously, as we're trying to present these priorities to the council, do you have a budget number you're prepared to give them
For waste oil,
for the conversion?
30 grand.
That's today's numbers?
Yeah, well, yeah, because we can save about 20, I think it was about 2,400 on the boiler if we get it through Napa before that increase takes effect.
All right. So that would have to be done this budget year.
Yes. Other than that, addition to the city center, I've talked to some of you about it. I just, again, it's something that I need help pushing only because of time. I've talked to, I think, all the city council about it. It just, and it'll be in this year's budget request as far as how to make it work. I've talked with Chris Helvey about it as far as how to make it work. And it's just a matter of getting there, timing wise, getting there. That's all I got.
Thank you for that. I think I covered everything we talked about. Does anybody have any more comments on anything we've discussed? Or is there anything else that anybody feels that should be brought to the council's attention for a priority this year? I'd sure welcome input, the more the merrier, because this is a once in a year shot for us to try and get to the council. Okay, I'm going to take that as we've got it covered. So I'm going to go ahead and close discussion on that and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is other items. Does anybody have any other items that they would like to bring up at this time?
Mark, if there's an opportunity, I'd love to be able to sit down with you at some point to kind of just go over and just kind of get to better understand, this committee and how you guys operate, if that's possible.
Sure thing. I'm wide open. I got a dentist appointment tomorrow and I'm going skiing Thursday. And other than that, I got no plans till.
Wonderful. I'll shoot you an email.
Okay, sure thing.
Thank you, Mark.
All right.
I'll throw something out here while we have the council people here. This has nothing to do with roads per se.
Well, we've got all public works, not just roads. So
just public works. Okay. There have been a few people have kind of wondered if it would be anywhere feasible. This is completely random. So you can snicker if you'd like. It would be wonderful.
Those.
Yeah, I gave you due warning, Dave. So there have been some questions about it would be nice to have something similar to other cities and having a cemetery for Woodland Hills residents so that they're not purchasing cemetery plots in other towns.
As long as it's not the park.
Well, you can play soccer on top of my grave. I don't mind.
Well, we could be Catholics and we could stick them in the churches.
No, it was just a thought that it seems that most cities, as they begin to grow and grow up, shall I say, and mature, that they start doing something where you have lifelong residents who want to be interned in their own location. Just a thought. So if you're looking at some of these buffer zones between some of the developments and our locations, that might be something for consideration.
There's a body in somebody's backyard up on Oak.
There is?
Yep.
Well, we're not talking about my dog.
No, it's a human body.
Really?
Is it an urn or is it a body?
It was a body.
Wow.
Impressive. So, David, had any of these residents proposed potential sites for said cemetery?
No, we never went beyond anything because I'm not a city council member. So I just said, you know what, I actually like that idea. And so it was just something that we were chewing around at dinner time with some friends. And we have some longtime residents, and I was just thought I'd throw that out there for consideration as the city begins to grow.
Just use your backyard.
You know what? I've told my wife many times, just roll me off the side of the hill. I'll be good.
You'll use your neighbor's backyard is what you
That's illegal, by the way. That's
Yes.
not legal.
Well, she's very compliant with the law, so there's that.
Right.
Put a little graveyard over by the salt shed.
We already have one. I won't tell you who's there.
Is there any other business?
Sorry.
By the way,
sorry, Mark.
Dave, that's not a bad idea. I've thought about it too, but that's not really on the city's top list. I'll say it that way.
Shocking, shocking,
it-
David.
Make it a density bonus for a developer.
There you go.
You know, I do like the idea of, again, part of the reason we're getting hit with the whole water is just because in the past we were able to dump water and they went into empty fields. So the idea of, you know, putting some kind of a buffer or whatever in, and that's not a bad one. Of course, I don't know that people would want to know that their bodies are buried in places that we expect to flood, but you know.
I'm not
The
even
water, the grass bill would be pretty low.
Most cities
That's
call
true.
that a secondary use. Most places put like a basketball court or a volleyball court in a basin,
or a park of some sort, yeah.
or put a cemetery.
Is that, well, I mean, it's, you know, is that even legal?
Probably not.
No.
Gaskets float.
Well, that, and,
Pretty
you know,
moral,
the
right?
other thing is it becomes detention, and water is going to seep. Does it become I'm not being facetious here. Does it become an environmental hazard that you're draining water into a, you know, you
In
got.
theory, they're supposed to be sealed. The vaults are
Somebody
supposed to
else's
be sealed.
well.
Yeah,
It's called
groundwater.
it's
Groundwater issue, exactly.
It's called accelerated decomposition.
So,
Well, the
Anyway.
vaults are supposed to be sealed so that you don't have any groundwater contamination, something of that nature, from any of the embalming liquids that they use. So once again, this is just something that most cities as they grow begin to do. And if we have a water problem and we need some extra space to you know, have some seepage areas that would be helpful, why not?
Worth keeping in mind.
Well,
Interesting.
again, instead of letting developers increase density and it's all just freebies, get something out of it. I mean, that's what all other bigger cities do, is start with a minimum and allow density bonuses for amenities.
Right. And that's something the city council could address, even if it's in terms of the future.
Well, that's how we got the city park.
Right, right. Well, other than that, rather random comment, I don't have any more, Mark.
okay. If there's nothing else, next meeting date, again, is we set it up for the first Tuesday of the month, and March is exactly the same calendar as April, except for leap years. So that would be Tuesday, the 1st of March will be our scheduled next meeting date. Again, at 6 o'clock. Once again, we talked last month about maybe starting some in-person meetings. The consensus was to stay on Zoom, or maybe do a hybrid where we can have a central location similar to what the council does. Anybody wanting to join by Zoom can. Any thoughts on that at this point, or do we just want to stay Zoom?
I like Zoom. That's just me.
It is convenient, but you know, sometimes you just lose the personal touch. That's, you know, as long as we're all okay with that, we've been doing these meetings since this committee was started, because this committee started about the same time the whole issue
COVID.
started. So we really haven't had any in-person meetings except for maybe the first 5 or 6 when we were a road committee. So we can continue to do this, or maybe as we get more into summer, we can look at an outdoor meeting. So unless somebody has any other input on that, I would say let's go ahead and schedule March's meeting as a Zoom meeting, and then we can address it month to month as we go. Is any thoughts or objection to that plan?
My only concern, just something to keep in the back of our mind, it takes Jody's time.
Well, I agree. I
to
agree.
Set the meeting up. So just let's think about that too in the future and
Okay.
as we go. I don't object to these meetings, but it does obligate her some.
Okay, well, let's talk about it next month. Maybe when we get into April, weather might be good enough that we can go ahead and maybe hold a meeting at the pavilion at the park or something that way. It still gives us some separation, and we actually get to, you know, we can maybe have, pizza and root beer or whatever the case might be, and,
Right.
talk a little bit that way.
Well, I propose an adjournment of this meeting.
Okay, that was going to be the next item on the agenda. But that being said, we have a motion for adjournment. Really don't need a second, but I'll ask for a second anyway. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Dave and Wayne. All righty, guys. Thanks for your time. I'll go ahead and get all this summarized up, and I'll get it